Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Coleman. I am the editor of Greenhouse Management Magazine, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar, Behind the Scenes, How Agriware ERP Transforms Inventory Management and Strategic Planning at Hoffman Nursery. As you can tell by the title of today's webinar, we are talking Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP systems. And I'm sure, as all of you on this call know, those software solutions and mobile solutions are key to driving operational efficiency in your business. So getting the right plants to the right people at the right time. We've got a great conversation in store for you today. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that during the conversation, please feel free to use the Q&A feature in your Zoom window to ask questions. We will field them at the end of the webinar. You can also ask questions in the chat. We will be monitoring that as well. So your questions can be answered at the end. Answered by who? Well, that's another question. Let me introduce our panelists today. First is David Hoffman. David Hoffman is the Chief Operating Officer at Hoffman Nursery, where he leads long-term strategic planning and oversees the management of sales and operations. Hoffman Nursery is a daily user of Agriware software and specializes in producing ornamental and native grass liners for the wholesale horticultural industry. In conversation with David today is Garrett Walsh. Garrett is a third-generation horticulturalist in production horticulture. He now brings next-generation ERP software and mobile solutions to large-scale growers like Hoffman and across the U.S., helping future-proof their business. So, gentlemen, David, Garrett, let's get into it. How are you using these ERP systems to improve and help you be successful?
Fantastic. Thank you, Patrick, so much for the introduction. David, I think that's a question right for you, right from the very beginning. I know Patrick did a fantastic introduction, but kind of just for our audience, would you mind kind of walking us through getting to know Hoffman Nurseries and also tell a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, so Hoffman Nursery is, as Patrick mentioned, an ornamental grass young plant supplier. So we've been around for 38 years. My folks, John and Jill Hoffman, many of you may know them, had started the business and have been in the business for the whole time. And John recently retired, but we still specialize in that grasses and sedges and rushes. And actually, we just recently introduced a new product line, which is a green infrastructure collection, which includes some perennials as well. So just to kind of complement and really add to those plants. So we've got about 70 employees here. And that includes both domestic workers, and we also use the H2A program. And we operate with about on 135 acres worth of land, with probably about 50% of it in production. So everything from field stock to we've got some hoop houses, gutter connects, glass house, greenhouses. So a little bit of everything, depending on what types of plants that we're producing at what time of the year too, to try to extend that season and deliver those plants for folks all the time. So my background, went to NC State for horticulture, and I from there moved actually to Germany to work for a company that did Finnish ornamental grasses and some other perennials, and then moved back in 2015 and started working with the family business and have been here ever since. We started working with Agriware probably 3 years ago or so, and have been really happy with the success that we've seen with it, and we'll get more into that later today.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. And thank you so much for that background. Kind of before we jump into the nuts and bolts of our webinar today, I want to give you everyone in the audience a little bit about Mprise Agriware. Here at Mprise, we like to help people within horticulture, within this business, excel. That is the name of the game. With our ERP software, with Agriware, and our team of over 100 plus employees throughout the world, really focus on deploying that a horticulture software solution. We've been doing this since 2004, so we've about 20 years underneath our belt. And the nice thing is the the distribution of our consultants, our sales team, our administrators, and our project managers, and also our developers between Europe, North America, Australia, and India really gives us an unparalleled advantage when looking at an ERP system, because not only are, as I was saying, our entire team being able to have our roots from this business really gives us an unparalleled advantage, so that when we meet and talk with each one of our unique customers on a one-to-one basis, we understand the pitfalls and the uniqueness of this business. And that's probably what separates us out. We're also a Microsoft certified partner, and we get to leverage a lot of that capability, which I'll kind of mention as we go through the webinar today, being that we're able to have that foundation, that robustness, that tradition, that quality name. We're really able to bring in a lot of components that Microsoft is working with in the future, and also currently what they're doing now, that gives us kind of unparalleled access to be very modular in our approach, so that we can be very specific for each one of our projects. One thing I'll do very quickly is we'll kind of review the agenda for today. I want to really have a candid conversation with me and David, kind of talking about strategic growth and kind of the modularity and the ability that we have within Agriware, and kind of bring those two worlds together. Ultimately, when you're looking at any kind of ERP project, you want something that is scalable in design and honestly brings value to you and your organization today. Understanding that Agriware itself is utilized as a tool. That doesn't mean we're not making advancements every day, but that means right now, when you come onto our standard platform, you're able to start utilizing it and bring value to you and your organization right now. Next thing we'll cover is kind of the on-floor capability of what we can do within the system, showing some integral parts of sales and production planning. Ultimately, doing all that kind of results in some supply chain understanding within Agriware and examples of reports that we can get out of the system. And then lastly, we'll leave some time for some Q&A. But kind of talking and kind of breaking into the subject where me and David actually kind of get to talk, let's cover that concept of strategic growth. I know kind of from this business, and now specifically in the current role that I'm in, when you're looking at a ERP project, it's always good to look at it at a very holistic level. So David, I'm going to ask you, when you're looking at choosing an ERP, why is it critical to think in very broad scope and a holistic approach?
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, I think that, for so much of what we're looking at when we were trying to jump into an ERP, or trying to make that decision about whether that was where we wanted to be in 5 years, 10 years, was really how big of a business or how much change was going to take place, I think, over the next few years that we were trying to, plan for. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but with my dad retiring and, with the team, potentially changing over time, some of that institutional knowledge too, and trying to collect that and store it in some type of system, something that's usable, something that can work with other types of programs. So we already used Microsoft Outlook and that Outlook, or that Microsoft suite. So, looking at this system sort of made sense for us. And, there's definitely what type of risks. I mean, it's not necessarily a cheap system. But again, recognizing the amount of energy and time that you spend in the system every day, how much of that actually saves you time in your overall processes throughout throughout your entire working day, or all of your employees' days too. I mean, I think all of that really, goes into that decision-making process for it. So, those are key things, I think.
Risk is a great question, because I mean, it's always anything and everything that we're doing within this business can be risky. And that's kind of the nature of the game. We get to deal with Mother Nature, who is always throwing curveballs at us as an element of risk. But now when you're talking about, putting value to that risk by doing an ERP implementation, do you think that the juice was worth the squeeze when you're looking at doing an ERP? Understanding that, you might have some immediate buildup when you're kind of adopting this new program, but hopefully that long-term mentality in the background will ultimately pay it off. Do you think a solution like Agriware would help mitigate those risks?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even thinking about some of the other things, like when we were making that decision about other ERP systems, I mean, when you think about some, and not to say like smaller ones can't be as good, But if they are single operators or have, maybe only a few people in that office that you're reliant on for your entire business, mitigating that risk of saying, okay, well, Agriware is a bigger company, they have more than one person that can solve that problem. That was something else that helped us make that decision, and looking at those risks and saying, and weighing that out in the kind of the long-term vision for it.
Fantastic. I know from a former operations person myself, there's always these fields of thought that you're more, sales driven or more production driven or more growing driven. Personally, what kind of camp do you reside in? Are you really focused more on being able to use ERP for sales, production, basic inventory, growing capability? What thing kind of excites you the most?
I'm more recently, in general, I guess, is really trying to dive into the sales and reporting and numbers part of all of Agriware. I mean, I think that the team here has done a really good job of implementing all parts of it that we're into right now. And I think that there's a lot more that we can get into. And I think that, what we've done so far really matched what we did with our previous systems. And so now that we've kind of got our feet wet and really have a good understanding of that, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to be able to grow and continue to dive deeper into things. Like there's a lot of costing type stuff that I think that there's a lot of potential for things like that to really be able to be more knowledgeable about it, to help us make better business decisions for sales or for, to help serve our customers better, or, any number of things, just to give us, because we collect so much data here that I feel like, sometimes it doesn't always get used in the best way, or that, we don't have time to go back and analyze it. So really trying to find good ways to either report it or frame it a certain way so that we can make decisions from it is now and will be more important in our business as we continue to grow.
Got it. Fantastic. I got to ask, since it was sales driven, and I know, again, the seasonality of this business is sometimes there is no sleeping, and whenever you're during busy season, was there a tipping point? Was there a point where you go, man, I'm not doing another fall again or another spring because we had these issues without another robust solution? Was there a kind of a tipping point for you that made you kind of look out for a possible solution?
I mean, I think, getting back to the institutional knowledge and really just having everything in one place and having all of these different modules talk and really work in sync, it's the amount of time and that it did save, and also trying to think through really how does it trying to figure out like the ideas and how people actually solved these problems before, putting it into the system so that we don't have to relearn all of this or make the same mistakes or spend the money on the mistakes again. I think that to me was one of the biggest opportunities to be able to do it. I mean, I still think there's a lot of information that we need to put into the system, and there's still things that we probably have said that are, oh yeah, that we knew that and we should have put that in already. But I think that, there's definitely still more to learn with it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know that's what's kind of unique, being able to have all that information. It's great to get information, but ultimately to act on it is the true art, right? That's that's why you need an ERP to categorize and organize that so that you have that competitive advantage to make decisions, to minimize risk. And oftentimes when I'm talking to potential customers and we're looking at risks, they go, okay, where's my ROI? Where is this going to pay me back on the back end? And, in the short term, yes, we can focus on labor savings. We can focus on material savings, just overall understanding of sales and booking. But ultimately, what we want that data to do is also to speak and guide decisions for the future. Sometimes the greatest ability to minimize a risk is to avoid it. And so being able to have that insight about that future understanding really gives us kind of a leg up. I want to kind of, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say to that point. I mean, I think one of the things I talked to somebody about ERP systems within the past year, and there were just some simple things that we were able to do within the system that I was talking to them about, that they said that saves me, like, I forget, it was like a half a person's time the entire year. And it was just something simple within the office administration side of things that they were all doing manually right now. And that to them was like, oh, this just makes sense.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's one of those most interesting things is when you're looking at efficiency, the compound efficiency component where, granted it is it's a second, but it's a second multiplied by X amount of minutes, multiplied by X amount of hours, compounding all the way up. So there's a real value there, and being able to understand that's uniquely important. One thing I want to touch on too, this industry is very unique. I'd say we're one of the first industries that was very much vertically integrated before it was trendy in the big world, in a way that oftentimes we are doing multiple components within doing our production. So some of us will do our own seeds, tissue culture, liners, we'll internally produce them, we'll externally purchase them, we'll do everything from small liners all the way to field planting. One thing that's unique too, oftentimes, is we also go where the market kind of dictates us. Do you feel like, going with a robust ERP gives you that flexibility to, when you have to add uniqueness into your product line, do you feel like you have that ability?
yeah, I do. I think that, a couple of examples, I mentioned it at the beginning of our discussion, but we recently added that green infrastructure collection, which granted, it's only 20 different varieties of plants. But that was an easy add, and, you're going through and making production modules or making sales goals, and then going through and making those production modules thereafter. And I think it just makes it easy to be able to do that. The other thing that we've been able to do is we had, a custom grow that we were able to do that was 80 additional line items that we typically don't do. And so again, going through and adding those plants in, learning about them and figuring out what needed to happen to be able to make those successful was just another line item in how this worked. And, there was definitely a learning curve with it, but working with the system gave us the ability to price, trying to think through how you can be more efficient through the system, and would it work with space planning and those types of things. I think were all ways that we figured out how to make it work for us.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's probably one of the most unique components when we're looking at the screen above. We can see all those processes, right? We've got scheduling, purchasing, crop control, inspections. Again, you want to have that all-encompassing ERP that can manage all those components, and also allows us some flexibility there too. I know one of the biggest things that we've been pushing within Agriware recently is increased ability to handle sales fulfillment, understanding all of the logistical components of determining load plans and optimizing picking routes and how things are ordered. All of these intricate components, again, having one ERP that can handle that from start to finish, like Agriware, really gives us that ability to understand what we're doing, but also change as the market changes and as things change from a day-to-day perspective. Speaking of day-to-day, how do you feel that Agriware right now has assisted you with making kind of data-driven decisions? Do you feel like, there's definitely the benefit there?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, but just, trying to dive into the costing a little bit. I think that helps us make sales decisions. Anything that we can do to try to streamline any communication between departments and prevent human errors helps save us time and prevent mistakes in the end. I think those are some of the easy, I guess, low-hanging fruit for a lot of success and to your point, risk avoidance earlier.
Perfect. One thing that's really unique with Agriware too, and this is what we want to, definitely showcase, being that we've had so much experience within the specific industry over 20 years, we really want to showcase that our foundation on Microsoft gives us a very unique advantage. And that is one that, we get to approach each project as a unique entity. This is projects that are not dependent on size or the amount of key users. We can be very, very small, but we can also represent very, very large. And one of the key components of being able to do that is the modularity of Agriware being built on top of Business Central. And so for these key components, I know, David, for your guys' use of Agriware now and then also in the future, has the modularity, has the ability to really focus and bring value on certain components, was that a big help in making that decision of ultimately?
I think what he was going to say is choose Agriware for us, and I think yes, that modularity and that ability to be able to grow what we're doing through the program and having, I mean, again, such a robust system to be able to continue to grow that system is something that that was a part of the decision process as we were choosing an ERP system. The capabilities of Business Central in and of itself is great. But when you add in the ability to be able to plan your production processes, financial planning around that, and then costing as well, I mean, I think all of those parts really tie together. And when they do all work together within the same system, like what we've seen is that it's extremely helpful to just, again, continue to make those decisions and make sure that you have all of the same information feeding into that equation so that you can make the right decision.
Got it. When it comes to the human factor, that's oftentimes the other component. It's great to have a product that can do all these things, but one thing I know when we deal with projects is each project is unique, each project's different. Could you kind of speak a little bit to how at least Mprise has approached the product or approached Agriware within your organization, and kind of what our goals are to act as that middle ground between what you're currently doing to your day-to-day to ultimately what the potential of the system is?
I mean, I think with, I guess, through the discussions of how to, I guess, get the most out of the system, I think one of the things that we went in with is this is, I guess discussing it with your team through that discovery process and saying, okay, this is what the system should do, and this is what your current processes are, and how can we make sure that, we're really bridging that gap to make sure that things aren't dropped by the time they get to, when you actually go live in the system and having those conversations. And I think that, really having a good understanding of what our needs was important to us, and making sure that that conversation happens before you really get into the system or do any testing. Because if it's not right, if the conversation wasn't framed in the right way in the beginning, then everything that you're basing that off of is going to be completely wrong in the end. And so everybody's wasted kind of a lot of time to do that. And so I think that that's been something that, we wanted to make sure that as through these discussions that, there was a good understanding from both sides of what our needs were, and trying to fit it to the system as much as possible. You hear so often that, people want to build a custom system because that's really, our processes are special, and nobody else can do this, and that's really not true. I think it's just taking what you currently do and framing it in a way that, if you're creative about some of these things, then maybe they can fit to some of these systems. And if you don't have to do something custom, then you could also save yourself a lot of money and headaches moving forward too. And I think with that, we discussed the modularity before, but also if we can take a standard system, and if you guys are already adding more either modules or other add-ons or whatever to that system, and maybe it's either a part of it or it doesn't cost that much more, then all of a sudden we've gained even more efficiencies without having really a lot of other additional costs or other things, and then still getting the benefits from the system.
Right. And I think that's another thing that's really interesting too within Agriware itself, being that we are on the cloud. You are always using the most up-to-date version of Agriware. So now when we look at projects, we're not going to be constrained by what the possibility of our on-prem solution is. We are now kind of have that unlimited ability to continue to add these components, really scale out the project so it's useful for you. Harold, you've got a question?
There was a question in the chat that what is an ERP?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, we can definitely answer that. Sorry. An ERP itself is an enterprise resource planner. This is kind of an all-encompassing component that allows you to act as that data storage understanding, kind of put all of your information within the system that gives you the ability to understand where your finances are at, for planning, sales fulfillment, production, purchasing. We can also include all of those other components, but essentially it is a tool that is going to be the backbone of your business so that you can interact with the data and multiple departments can interact with it as well. So ultimately you understand from a cost perspective and from an operational perspective where everything is going out. Another thing that's really interesting too, being able that we're able to build and leverage on that Microsoft relationship. We get to again take advantage of that component, and that's what also makes it very unique. In the center of this slide, you see Agriware 365 right in the center. But the nice thing is too, if you are using financial components or if you're using basic standard manufacturing, we get to leverage all of that prior relationship that we have with Microsoft Business Central, and we get to use that in correlation with Agriware. So from the Agriware perspective, it's there to be built and understand horticulture, understand the nuance of seasonality, forward planning, backward planning, shrink, all those components. And so the uniqueness is Agriware itself is built, but it also facilitates other components of Microsoft. So if you're utilizing Teams or if you're utilizing Outlook, we can tie those two components together. Same thing with the Power Platform. This is what we also get to do in terms of reporting and automating specific instances. Within that Power Platform, we get to leverage that possibility to generate Power BI reports that are specific to individual KPIs or roles that you have within your organization, or from a Power Automate standpoint, any action that happens within Agriware can actually cause a reaction and cause an alert and cause all these subsequent actions to take place. Good news is with Agriware, we get to kind of map all these components out. So when we work on a project on a one-to-one basis, we're really understanding all of the wish list of that current item, what their current process is. And then like David said, we match that up. We act in the middle so that we're, again, bringing value to those things that are most important, and we get to leverage all of that capability. The other thing that we've built that's not listed on this screen is the other additions within Agriware, which I'll kind of show on a little bit later as it relates to all of our field mobility and our registration of activities through our app platform. Kind of talking about, an implementation journey, why do you think it's needed, David? And I know you kind of mentioned this to support that long-term scalability. I know one thing that we've chatted about, as we talked about earlier today, was the future components, the ability of using AI, of using reporting. What are kind of the things that when you're looking at scaling up with Agriware, what are some of the things that bring you the most excitement?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot, frankly. A lot of it's just diving deeper into the system, getting more involved with some of the mobile apps that are out there to be able to do real-time, evaluation of crops and put that type of information into the system. The AI portion of it, to be able to automatically read emails as far as putting those orders into the system without having someone having to do that would be pretty interesting to me. Doing data reporting, and then with that, trying to figure out how to, like I said, leverage that data that we do collect to make the most of it. What else? I think trying to tie, like I said, different parts of the business together, everything from the financial part to even the sales and forecasting, and because there is so much I think opportunity there to say, okay, if you do this forecast scenario, then it will cost you this much money at the end if all of your costing and everything is in there. Or if you do this one, you can either be more successful or less successful to help make that decision. And that really is game changing to be able to look at that. And really, I feel like there's a point where, when you're starting even before or at that point where you're looking for a ERP system and it's like, well, I have all this work I have going on. How is it possible for me to be able to look at forecasting a year out or something like that, or 2 years out? And then you get into the system, it saves you a bunch of time. And then you can get to the point where you're actually able to plan farther and farther into the future. I think that's a real opportunity, and that ability to save time and have the right people to help inform some of those decisions really is a great opportunity to continue to be able to be creative about how to grow the business.
Fantastic. I've actually got a personal question for you, David. If you could take the product anywhere 5 to 10 years from now, what would be your wish list? What would be your top item? What would be the thing that goes, hey, you know what, Mprise, if you can do this, you're my best friend.
A crystal ball for the market would be great. I think more within reason. I mean, really, trying to figure out or have, and this is where I think, our ability to be able to get further and further into the system and have better insights into our data, I think is going to be extremely important to us to be able to help make those decisions. I mean, one of the things that I think is going to be really important for our customers is some type of communication platform, whether it's a portal or something like that, to be able to look at kind of the things where, whether it's their past orders, whether it's our information that we're trying to put out there, and whether that's new bulletins of new products that we're putting out, or giving them the tools to be more successful. And that could be not just inventory related or availability, but it could also be education as well. And it's like links to whether it's new products or bulletins and sending them to the website or something like that. I mean, anything that would be value added to our customers, I think would certainly be beneficial. I mean, the other thing would be opportunities for cost cutting, or say, and again, I don't know how the system could do this necessarily, but saying, hey, here's a space for you to grow another blah, blah, blah plan. I don't know.
Yeah, no, we definitely have all those tools, and that's probably what the most exciting kind of part is as we kind of go through the journey is understanding those future components. The nice thing is with Power BI right now, we can actually understand that relationship between planned versus actual. That helps you for your day-to-day, but that also helps you when it comes to space planning or labor planning for the future. So again, you get to start hypothetically running these scenarios through a Power BI report, and you can actually look at a detailed understanding of each one of these scenarios, approve it, and then release it. And then so that kind of gives you that enhanced flexibility to really be able to understand what's happening. And then ultimately, the other leverage thing with the system that we get to do is, again, it's all based on actuals. So it's fantastic that you've come up with this plan, and January 2nd of every year, your plan changes. It's all based on what's currently happening. And so this is, again, always that causal relationship of understanding what's happening. The Power BI dashboards give you that ability to understand that, and we will map that out for you so that when you log in and you view that as your role, and you want to see sales or you want to see inventory management, you'll understand where you're currently at, where you're expected to be, and where you could go through some scenario planning. One thing that's unique is where Agriware is at right now. Like I mentioned before, we get to utilize a lot of tools within our basic ERP. However, how do we actually make sure all of that action takes place and happens out in the field? That's where our apps come into play. And I think, David, that's probably one of the most exciting things, that as Hoffman continues to grow, you'll get to really start to use and adopt a lot of those apps. Our app platform has the ability to really handle all of those day-to-day operations out on the floor. So from a production standpoint, we have the ability to do all of the quantitative and qualitative measurements and updatings of the system so that your understanding of what's actually out in the system and how it's impacted by any kind of characteristic is understood. Because again, all that information gets relayed back into Agriware. A couple other things to keep in mind. With our mobile platform, we have the ability to be multilingual. We have that ability to, again, understand that role perspective, who that person is in the field, what their job is, how they interact with that product, how do they interact with the day-to-day operation. From a shipping standpoint, I would say this is probably where we have most of our biggest advancements that we've had recently. We have the ability to pick, pack, and load. Now, again, those are great fun buzzwords. What does that mean? The system can actually generate and optimize how we pick our product in the greenhouse, how we pack it, whether we're packing with the sleeve, label, tag, dependent on that customer specifics, how we rack it, and how we load it. That, again, allows us to efficiently translate that data so that you let the role of the people within your organization perform at what they do best. Next thing that's always very important is, and then it relays into that data, is the financial component. Within Agriware, we have a team of financial consultants, specifically here in North America and in Europe, that, again, we want to integrate all of these components. At the end of the day, our main job is to make money. And so we want to be able to make sure our ERP can can be on track and be in the background and again support those day-to-day operations. In terms of sales order management, we'll jump on a couple of these topics as we kind of go through. But again, it's really this now, if we're tracking that data using Agriware and the dashboards that we have, we get to match supply versus demand. We get to understand the impacts of change. We get to understand all the things that's happening out in the field, and we can relay all that information back to our customer, ultimately to the operations team, so they can make sure the fulfillment happens correctly. Next thing that's obviously very huge that David's touched on is the planning and forecasting. Again, understanding what the plan was and where we actually are between labor, space, materials. All of this is so massive, and all of this starts out in the field. Again, the data is only as good as the data that you can collect, and through our app platform, long gone are the days of pen and paper. The ability to utilize that platform and register those results out in the field really gives us that leg up. And then lastly, inventory management. Having real-time understanding to track all that availability and movements from a tracking and tracing capability, again, gives us all of that understanding. So from an item availability perspective, Agriware is able to handle all of these major components. If you are looking at purchasing, if you're looking at any kind of sales forecasting or production forecasting, and also CRM potential. So that's probably what the most unique components of Agriware really are, is we have that ability to integrate very many departments that you have within your organization. We can do that in a streamlined modular approach so that it works best and you see that value right away. When it comes to kind of integrating sales and production planning, I know these are some of the most exciting things that you're talking about and looking at, David. What else is the potential there? I know if you could read the market, but when you're listening to your buyers, say if you're selling to big box stores, being able to integrate with them would still be a huge advantage, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I
think that.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you.
I was just gonna say, trying to figure out, like you said, other opportunities that maybe there's space for them to grow an additional 500 or 1,000 or whatever that number is plants. And then being able to look back at what we can do in-house and know that we have space available or time or labor to be able to do that. And make it make sense and give time. I think that definitely gives us more opportunities that you can literally see in the program.
Fantastic. One thing that's obviously very important is that supply chain component. If you're doing ornamentals, it's great to know where all those costs are. If you're doing veggies, from a tracking and traceability standpoint, it's good to have all those components as well. Our service and within Agriware, we have the ability to have full supply chain understanding of what's happening out in the field. One of the most unique things, like David mentioned, is that's order in time concept. Again, if we can have the ability to increase our rotations, even from 12 to 13, that is an entire massive potential of product that we get to grow and revenue that we can bring in just because we understood what our planning looked like from the very beginning. From an item tracking perspective, David, do you see that there's any value there that we're able to track the sourcing of what product came in and what varieties we're using?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something, we've, a certain, I guess, backwards tracking with some of that stuff is really important. Like for instance, if we run into an issue with a customer or they said that, if we had sent them the wrong plant or something had happened or, whatever, those types of things, certainly that gives us a unique ability to look back through the jobs and say, well, this is all should be right. What happened here? Was it a human error? Was it something in the system? And kind of what happened there. Being able to track and know why crops performed better or worse, and then being able to, I guess, learn from that and grow that differently. The next year is always something that we're trying to look at and trying to figure out how to improve those crops and get better yields from those crops year over year, because we do have that historical data and can track that through the system and then look at that data that way. Both of those are important. And then, like I said, being able to manage and know where our stock came from is also something that we continue to, and we've got stock coming from a lot of different places. We do a lot of it in-house ourselves, but I think that there's, just being able to track and know where that came from gives us a really good idea of the quality and also just making sure that that quality persists through the system. So
Fantastic. Yeah, I know specifically when you're looking at sourcing, just like your customers always want to know where that information comes in terms of credits, you need that ability as a purchaser to also relay that to your vendors. Hey, I received this shipment, and upon inspection that we had generated from Agriware, we had these issues. And as a result, it resulted in these components not being fulfilled. Again, it gives you actionable items, gives you actionable data that, again, you can connect, tie in within Agriware so that it really allows you to, again, optimize those solutions. Lastly, reporting. This is one example of a report and kind of what I would recommend too, as we've talked about, because I'm going to be cognizant of time. I think we've only got a couple minutes left. If there are any components that you want to see, reporting obviously is always one of the highest up there. Being able to understand what's happening, being able to be on the fly and understand all of these components is massive. What you're seeing right in front of you is an example of what labor and resource allocation report would look like. Again, this is broken up by our planned hours of particular activities throughout the week. I know, David, you mentioned you guys do some seasonal labor. Within Agriware, we can actually bring in all those resources as well, and actually you can understand where those components bring value. I've got another one I know that's really big when you're looking at tracking those resources. The need for understanding preventative maintenance, the need for understanding all of those major assets that oftentimes are very, very expensive. Do you see the potential of an ERP like Agriware being able to manage, those big assets?
Yeah, I think that, to your point, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity to be able to manage any of these things and just try to track it over time. I mean, I think that's one of the nice things about that, and to be able to say, I mean, even looking at what you've got here and saying, okay, well, if I have a transplanter that's only running this amount or those types of things, it should be able to know how long that transplanter's run, and if you need to do some preventive maintenance or those types of things on there too. Would have that capability.
Yeah, that's what's probably the most exciting too, is again, other things that we can do with our app platform. We can also schedule unplanned activities. So again, if it's cleaning, also maintenance, any action that needs to also happen from a production standpoint, we can also do all that from our mobile platform as well. Lastly, and this is a good example of costing, and I know this is, again, why we're in the business of what we're doing. What you see before you is the standard job statistics of what we have within Agriware. Again, you're always seeing this relationship between planned versus actual. We have the ability to track all of the direct costs that directly impact that plant. So materials, labor, equipment. We also have the ability to track the indirect costs, heating, electricity usage, if you're using any supplemental lighting. All of those factors play into the fact if you're going to make money at the end of the day. And again, that's the name of the game. That's really what we're there for. I mean, David, do you see the potential of understanding the indirect component, especially for more of our northern greenhouses who are using lots of heating or using kind of supplemental lighting?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's nice about what you've got up here is you can, by planning out different jobs or production schemes. So that's one of the things that we've got a lot of opportunity there, I think. But if you have a winter production round, if you have a summer production round, or a spring and then a summer or fall, each of those can be different production rounds, and they'll have different associated costs with that. And so I think that, knowing that if you have one price for all of those products, and trying to discern where or what either profit or where that needs to be for each of those, I think the system has the capability to be able to dial into each of those and really give you good information to make a decision about, well, maybe you shouldn't do as many in the wintertime because, the heating costs or the lighting costs or your shrinkage is too high for those plants. I mean, all of that can be eye-opening, I guess, when you get into some of the nitty-gritty of those numbers.
Perfect. That's really all I have, Patrick. I would like to have you come back in. Maybe we can kind of work on some of the Q&A. I want to be cognizant of our time with what we can do, but hopefully, in our brief conversations, we've been able to kind of show some real-time insights, why it's important to understand ERP, the decision of going into ERP, understanding all of that ability of how it affects in. I'll kind of leave it to you, Patrick, let's direct maybe some Q&A, and we'll close out the webinar with it.
Absolutely. Thank you both. What a great conversation there. We do have quite a lot of questions, so we'll try to get through them quickly. But I will say, if we do not get to your question, we will make sure that the panelists receive those questions and they can reach out to you directly or vice versa. And I believe, Garrett, you will be also sharing your contact information here at the end of the Q&A period before we say goodbye. So let's start with John. John has a couple of questions. He's particularly interested in how Agriware tracks the value of a plant over its lifetime on the financial ledger. So he gives an example saying, you know, if you were running a Christmas tree farm with 100 planted trees that take 4 years to harvest, how is that valuation calculated for each of the for the 48 period, and what adjustments are made when the ultimate harvest is only like 75 live plants opposed to the 100 planned? So how do you calculate that over a 48-month period as a tree grows? And I think you could apply that to other plants as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. Within Agriware, we have the ability, our production job concept comes on two fundamental characteristics. There is the production schemes and the activity schemes. The good news is the production schemes define time and space. That time and space can either be planned forwards or backwards. Regarding the longevity of this plant, that's no issue with Agriware. We can understand those 4 years, either between days, weeks, or months. More likely probably months. But then the nice thing is once we've defined that from a seasonality standpoint, we can apply that with activity schemes that show you what should happen at that definitive activity. The other key component that we can do from a production scheme level is we can go ahead and anticipate that planned output. So again, if I know that I'm expecting at the end of this 4 years, I'm expecting 75% production on the output side. By putting out and starting out with those amounts within Agriware, you'll actually have insight to that planning component. The great news is too, if after the first year, you know, your yields are doing better, your plants are doing better, we can actually have that where that impacts that planning as well. So again, you have that real-time understanding, those real-time aspects. Other components that we can do from that scheme level is we can plan on components of germination, scrap, and overproduction. And so again, these also give you that ability where the system can understand the numbers that you need in the back end. If I'm looking at a backward plan job and my customer goes, hey, I need 100 plants, but I know my shrink at the first phase is 8%, the system's going to go ahead and generate that appropriate amount that you're going to start with to give you that end result. Inversely, what we can also do with tree farms, we can also do more of a forward planned action. So again, anything that happens from the life cycle of that plant automatically updates the planning as that action happens. And again, you can go ahead and have that insight from the very beginning.
That's excellent. Couple more questions from John that you could probably answer fairly quickly. Is what financial accounting packages does Agriware connect to? And Letitia also wants to know, Letitia and John both have this question. How does Agriware integrate to CRM platforms, whether it's Salesforce or something else?
Yeah, so from the finance side, this is probably where I know as much as I know. That's probably where I would recommend let's maybe have a follow-up conversation with our dedicated finance consultants. I don't want us to point us in the right direction. Again, let's put the right people in charge. Regarding finance, I think we can probably follow up. I'll have some finance consultants within the Mprise team answer those questions specifically. And then from the CRM level, yes, we have the ability to do the CRM component within Business Central, but then we can also have those connecting out. So if you're using HubSpot or if you're using any kind of component, as long as we have an ISA 95 connection from an operational standpoint, or again, we know what that internal CRM that you're using now is, that's where our development team can come in and map out all those possibilities. Oftentimes when I start talking with the client, I ask them what are the things they really like using now? Because again, let's not reinvent the wheels. Let's leverage the ability of Microsoft to adapt and to connect to all these outside resources, and then we can map that out specifically.
Excellent. That integration obviously is super important. And another question Letitia has about that integration is Letitia wants to know, are there EDI capabilities for data transmission?
Yes, yeah, EDI is huge. Because again, it's mapping those connections out. And again, that EDI component is going to be different from every single different retailer. And again, that's what we oftentimes see. And so typically we have the ability to map out that EDI ourselves, or we can also work with a third-party broker to understand those components. At the beginning of the day, we need to know what you're currently doing, and then let's see what we can do to match up to work with those EDI aspects.
Right. A question from Jennifer. Jennifer is doing research. She's working in research and development in plant breeding.
Mm-hmm.
And Jennifer wants to know if you have any other R&D companies or universities using the Agriware software. And she wants to know if you would be willing to share any references.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, references are the name of the game. That's typically what I recommend. After we do, usually first a couple round of demos, it goes to the reference component because again, that's probably the unique thing about this industry. You're only going to talk to your peers that know better. To answer the question specifically, yes, we do deal with the R&D component and a lot of the research. We have a lot of genetic companies that deal with all of the intricacy understanding of either doing mother stock planning or tissue culture. Cool news is that's part of that vertical integration component of Agriware. We get to leverage that standard version of Agriware, which will handle all of those components. So again, if you have that research tendency, we can again be very, very useful and track all those components.
Great. David, we don't want to leave you out of the Q&A here. Giuliano is asking you, David, specifically, does Agriware serve as your sort of one-stop shop for the company for your software, or do you still use any other functions?
I would say yes, it does. I mean, I think that, you know, when we also use the Microsoft 365 suite, so Word and all of those products, which help, or Excel. I mean, that also helps. We do a little bit of like new plant tracking and trialing in FileMaker. Probably 90% of what we do is in Agriware, though. I mean, because of the capabilities of it, there's not much reason for us to be outside of it. And it doesn't, because it's tied to everything else, it really doesn't make sense for us to, if it has the capability to be outside of it.
Great. Let's see. I think we have another question from John here. Pardon me while I read it here. You know, I'm getting old, guys, so my eyes are getting worse and worse. So pardon me for so on the cost overview, John wants to know, how are those costs allocated to individual units? So average costing for the entire crop that gets to market, or spread against all planted and then treated as loss when X amount of plants die.
From a costing perspective, I know we have the ability to do both of those components. I believe we have average, standard, specific, and I believe there might be one more. But really, all of the financial components, that's where again we get to leverage that relationship that we have with Microsoft, and we get to build on that foundation. And so more often than not, what I'd like to do with John too is I want to give you a direct answer. I want to partner you up, if that's okay, with one of our finance consultants, and we can get that directly answered. But yes, I know right now we have the ability to do kind of average costing, standard costing, and again, we can understand all those costs perspective as it relates to the area or to the individual unit.
Excellent. Let's have a question from Mateus. Mateus joined a little bit late, so he didn't catch it, but obviously when you're working in horticulture, when you're working in agriculture, you're working in places that might not necessarily have a Wi-Fi available. So Mateus would like to know, what do you have in terms for wireless apps, specifically for those areas that may not be able to provide Wi-Fi?
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Within our mobile platform, we have two apps, both the Time app and the HR app. The Time app and the Inspect app, those both have offline capability. So the Inspect app really is intended for your growers, but also intended for people to register any kind of sprays that happen, any kind of inspections that need to happen, pictures, comments, videos, representative understanding of space. You can also do yield updates. So again, that impacts your quantity. The great news is that Time app has the ability to be on all, or that Inspect app has the ability to be all offline. It'll cache that information, and then upon connecting back to the internet, it will automatically relay that information. Our other app, the Time app, is our kind of our HR dependent app. Just like, again, being able to understand what people are doing out in the field, that's why we kind of designed it in that mentality. Again, we have the ability to understand all of each of one of your people or resources, ability for their daily and their weekly time sheets. So you can also put them into the prospective activities. So from our work app, that's kind of a one-to-one tracking of labor as it relates to that specific work order. But the Time app is unique. You can tie that over to a specific area, doing a specific activity, and then it'll break down that cost or that activity on all of the units within the area. So those two apps kind of give us the functionality to handle that offline capability.
It's great. Yeah, it's especially important for those places that are out there, outside of the typical technological systems.
Right,
Where we
right.
sometimes find ourselves. Another question here, and I will apologize for the pronunciation of your first name, but this is a question, I believe, from Goodmundur. I hope I did that correctly, and I apologize if that wasn't correct. They want to know, does Agriware require Microsoft business software in order to work, or is it a standalone system?
It is going to require that Microsoft component. Again, being the fact that the foundation, the very foundation of Microsoft is Business Central, it's kind of that one-to-one connection. Again, understanding though, if you are looking to use it as a one-off system, we can definitely have future conversations and understand what that relationship would look like. But ultimately, the foundation of Agriware is Microsoft.
All right. Another question here from Letitia. So Letitia recognized that you have ability for racking and loading, but she wants to know, what about for efficient routing throughout the business?
Yeah, so we have the ability to optimize how the product gets picked. We have also the ability to optimize how it gets loaded and racked. We can do everything in an optimal fashion based on the master data that we're defining. We set up those rules. The system will optimize either that route of how it gets picked, how it gets packed, how it gets loaded. We have about 48 different characteristics that we can play around with to optimize that loading plan. But ultimately, we can get everything to the truck. If we are looking at maybe doing routing in terms of that shipping component, that's really where we'd recommend having that extension coming on in. We, again, have explored this with a couple different customers, but we'll get everything onto the truck. If you want to have that extension to understand routing as it relates to trucking, then we can add that as an extension.
Excellent. With that, I think we have come right to the end of our time here. Before we go, Garrett, would you like to give your contact information so people can reach out to you directly? And for those who have joined us, you will be receiving a video of this webinar, and we can also make sure that you get into contact with Garrett. But for those who are still on, Garrett, let them know, how can they reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, my name is Garrett Walsh. I will put my email specifically in the chat. Yep, I think Harold just did it for me. Feel free to reach out to me. My goal as a business consultant is really to understand your situation. Let's show you what Agriware can do right now. Again, we are in the business of providing a solution. We are continually making improvements, but ultimately our goal is to utilize our standard platform to bring value to you and your organization right now. I intend to showcase that during every demo. I love looking at anything and everything that you want to provide for me. Throw me through the gauntlet. I want to make sure that after our meeting, you have a clear understanding of where Agriware starts and where Agriware ends so that we can optimize it for you and your solution.
Great. Thank you very much, Garrett. And thank you, David, I hope you both have a great afternoon on this Thursday, and thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.